So if we summarized how method invocations work at this point, we'd say that the compiler's role is to look at the compile time type of the object and determine if that method with those arguments actually exists for that type. But because the actual type of the object is not known, it's not determined until runtime which actual method to invoke. Because the compile time type and the actual type at runtime may differ, it's not determined until the method is actually called which version of that method is going to be invoked. And then also, as we just described, the compile time type might be an interface type, and so the actual type at runtime might be any object which implements that interface. This sums up the rules as I've laid them out so far, but there's actually another rule. When we invoke a method via the special this reference, it doesn't matter what the actual type is. An invocation via this always invokes the method which belongs to that class. So for example, in the class cat inside a method or constructor, you invoke this.foo. The foo invoked is going to be the one defined in cat itself, or if cat doesn't define its own version of foo, it's going to be the one inherited by cat. What's not going to happen is that this.foo invokes foo from a subclass of cat. And this is the case even if the special reference this is referencing a subclass of cat rather than an instance of cat itself. So say we have a class Mary and a class Leo which inherits from Mary. Defined in Mary are the methods foo and bar, and inside Leo we override foo. And let's say the definition for bar in Mary looks like this. Bar doesn't return anything, it doesn't take any arguments, all it does is it invokes the method foo via the special this reference. So if elsewhere in code we create a Leo object and then we invoke via that object the method bar, because remember Leo inherits bar from Mary, well in that call to bar, the special reference this is referencing a Leo object, not a Mary object. But because of the special rule, this.foo is not going to invoke foo that's overridden in Leo, it's going to invoke the foo of Mary. As this demonstrates, this special rule about this means that when we override a method, the version we're replacing doesn't necessarily have no bearing whatsoever on a subclass that overrides that method. In fact, whereas in this case we're invoking the overridden method from the ancestor indirectly, there's a way to invoke these overridden methods directly. Hence our fourth rule about method invocations. When you invoke a method via the reserved word super, you are invoking the inherited version of that method, the version inherited by the current class. So for example, say we have two classes, Ryan and Heather, which inherits from Ryan. And let's say Ryan has a method foo, and Heather overrides foo and has another method ack. And within ack, we simply invoke super.foo. When we then create a Heather object and assign it to h and invoke h.ack, well then within ack, super is a reference to the Heather object, but because we use super, this doesn't invoke the foo of Heather, it invokes the foo that Heather overrides, it invokes the foo in Ryan. The most common reason to use super is that when we override a method, we usually want to still do everything that the overridden method does, we just want to do more. And so very commonly when we override a method, within that method we'll be invoking the overridden version, and to do so we have to use super. Now, while I said that super is like the reference this, and that you can think of it as holding a reference to the current object, that is the object via which this method was invoked, but this isn't really accurate. In the case of this, we really can treat it as a reference, so here we're using this as an argument to another method. The only thing we can't do with this is assign to it. Within a method call, this is effectively constant, it always refers to the same object. In contrast, we can't treat super like just another reference, so say we can't pass it as an argument to another method. When you use super, you're always going to use it immediately followed by the dot operator.